We are Rogue Media Sports.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It is the Doomsday Podcast, a very, very special edition. And Ed Werder joins me in studio. Of course, we're at Frito Nation Productions, the home of the Doomsday Podcast. Also, so much thanks go out to Crossover Media Group, who we've partnered with. Certainly our Patreon folks who are excited to offer you sort of a different level of access this season. And Ed Werder, we have, as we tape this, we are reacting immediately, and folks will be listening to this hopefully, well, for years to come, but at least tomorrow. We are reacting to Jerry Jones and the Cowboys' State of the Team address to open up training camp in Oxnard, California. I will be in Oxnard beginning on August 7th. Be out there for about 4 days. And, Ed, why is it you have chosen not to join me? Does it have something to do with some of the festivities that are happening in Canton, Ohio, perhaps, coming up in a week or so?
Well, part of it is I don't like the way you answered my question when we were talking about airfares and class of travel, and you were not all that willing to go first class, which is, what I'm used to and probably why I'm not where I used to be. But actually, I do have a scheduling conflict I'm proud to announce. It's the best scheduling conflict I've ever had. I get to avoid hanging out with you in Southern California, and I'm going to something better, I think, in that since I won the Dick McCann Award for longevity and quality of NFL coverage and voted on by my peers, and I'm going to be recognized for that. And I think it's only right that Jerry Jones and I go into the Hall of Fame at the same time, and that I know I'm happy to beat Terrell Owens there. I think he'll get there eventually, but I'm glad to have my career recognized before his is. Sadly, Jimmy's going to be there, but he's not going to be inducted. He's not even in the Ring of Honor yet. But I look forward to seeing, the team is playing the game there, obviously, next week. A week from Thursday, the Cowboys play the Cardinals in the Hall of Fame game. So the current team will be there with the coaching staff, and a lot of the great players that I covered as a beat writer at the Dallas Morning News when they were winning 3 Super Bowls in 4 years will also be in attendance because Jerry's going in.
Yeah. I honestly think for most of them, I don't know about Charles, but most of the players that are attending are there for you, really. Even Troy. You and Troy have bonded over the years. You had a fine relationship back then. I think you badgered him a lot.
Back then? That suggests that I don't have one now.
No. I said it's even grown. I was saying you had a fine. I think now Troy loves you probably more than when you were a beat writer. Although I think you went over to Hawaii and covered the Pro Bowl, and Troy was in it, and y'all had some very good times.
It's a beach time.
Yeah, you could get under people.
I sat in the sand after they won the first Super Bowl, and I interviewed him at length on the beach, and as he talked about being the youngest quarterback since Joe Montana to win a Super Bowl at 25, and the significance of that to him, that no matter what he did thereafter, he was always going to believe that he had fulfilled his responsibility as the number 1 overall pick to win a championship for the team that drafted him.
Were you both in your swimsuits? Like, were you guys shirtless and in your swimsuits when you interviewed him on the beach?
I know I was not, because that's generally not the way I go to the beach. But I will say,
Ed, he does.
I will say the second year that we both went independently of one another, that I at least stayed for the whole game and he didn't.
Troy came on home. He'd had enough.
I don't know where he went, but he did not stay for the game.
He'd had enough.
I believe he may have had permission from George Seifert, but Seifert kind of forgot that when asked where the Super Bowl winning quarterback had gone.
I think Seifert brought croquis to the country. Like when I think of you go to the beach, you see all these guys or whatever. You played a lot of tennis, and people wear these croquis that wear glasses and all. You know what I'm talking about?
To hold your sunglasses.
Yeah. Seifert, in my mind, was the first guy to really popularize those, like on the NFL sideline. Ed, boy, more to come on your trip to Canton and all the things. But you will be hearing throughout this special edition podcast. It is the Doomsday Podcast. We've been on a little hiatus. Maybe that was a bad idea. I mean, Frito, our producer, tried to get us not to. You didn't want to do it. I needed a break. I mean, I had been working my tail off, and I needed a break. And I think it's great that we're back. And fortunately, all our subscribers, our listeners, our friends out there were bothered by it. And that's good. You want people to be bothered if you go away for a couple of weeks.
Do you think we lost anybody permanently?
Yeah, probably a few. But no, they'll be back. No, I don't think it's permanent. I think they will be back. You will be hearing on this podcast from Jerry Jones. Stephen didn't get much time, so a little bit of Stephen, maybe.
We're not going to hear from
Stephen. Probably not on this show.
I think Jason might get him.
Jason Garrett will be heard from. And as we react.
But Jerry Jones made a rather astonishing remark today. One that I think puts Roger Goodell on notice, perhaps.
Frito, play the music.
I have reviewed everything. As you know, he's had his complete president. There is absolutely nothing, not one thing that I've seen that has anything to do with domestic violence. I don't want to answer anymore, but I've seen nothing.
And there it was.
Judge Jerry.
Yeah, Ed talked about it at the off the top. Jerry Jones, who had said repeatedly in his State of the Team address, and again, we are just minutes following the State of the Team address as we're recording this, and want to share it with you, a special edition this evening. Ed Werder here with Matt Mosley after a brief little time away from the podcast. There's Jerry Jones, and one of the things Eddie kept saying is, well, I can't, we don't want to, and Jason said the same thing, we don't want to really talk about specific players, but Jerry can't help himself. They're very proud of this pick. They picked him fourth overall. He had an unbelievable season. Was one of the best players in the NFL. Had a tremendous impact on the Cowboys' success.
Led the NFL in rushing as a rookie.
Yes, he did, and
they built their entire team around him.
Yes.
If they don't have him running the football, I don't think that they can compete with the best teams in the NFL.
No, I agree with you. And there was Jerry making what was a passionate defense of knowing that the NFL has left this. And again, that's a conversation we've had before. Why has this thing gone on for a year now? I mean, it's
well. Part of the reason it's gone on, I think, as long as it has, is the NFL made a knee-jerk or summary reaction to its decision on Ray Rice discipline, only to have video emerge that ultimately wound up ending Ray Rice's NFL career, at least so it seems. And so they are going to be more diligent, and understandably so, in cases where there's going to be this level of public scrutiny. And you could argue that's not the only case that embarrassed the NFL as it relates to accusations of domestic violence against its players. We just had the thing, during the season with the Giants kicker, right? That also caused consternation about the NFL and how teams were handling these types of issues with players. And so I think their desire to make sure and allow time for all of the evidence that either supports or contradicts the allegations is a wise move. Now, should it last a year? I don't know. Maybe part of it is, too, that there continues to be an accumulation of offenses over time that causes the NFL to sort of reset.
But that has nothing to do with that particular investigation. To me, and again, I don't want to get too bogged down in this, but I'll just say this. The at some point diligence turns into dragging your feet. And I feel like at some point there has to be, as there is in the legal system, a right to a speedy trial. There has to be something like that in the NFL where literally a year later there should be some timetable. I mean, now maybe we'll hear. Now maybe what you're saying is right. We'll hear, well, they'll give an explanation and go, well, this is why it took so long, because we had to go here. We had to go talk to these people. Or we had to wait for this to happen. Right now, it doesn't seem like a fair process. And it doesn't seem anywhere near like due process. It seems like this player has just been held up under this forever, and it doesn't seem like it's ending. Adam Schefter, our friend at ESPN, said 2 or 3 weeks ago, well, it looks like it could be a game or two suspension. And then he said on our radio show that I do some ESPN radio. You may have heard every once in a while.
Yeah, sometimes you take a hiatus to accommodate that schedule. Go ahead.
I think that's unfair. Wait, are y'all not getting paid for while we're on this hiatus?
We're barely getting paid when you are here.
But Adam sort of hinted at, well, it looks like it's sort of going to come to something. It could be happening sooner rather than later. And now I think they're waiting for Jerry to go into the Hall of Fame before they announce anything.
I think that the media has sometimes been put in a position where they're speculating, at least according to the league office. When I inquire about where things stand and whether a decision has been made, the usual response is anything other than what we say is entirely media speculation about when this thing may end. And I think, while I get what you're saying, and I understand if I'm Zeke Elliott and I haven't done what I've been accused of doing that's led to this investigation, it is probably unfair for it to last as long as it has before even Jerry exonerates you. But I think a worse outcome is for them to prejudge, right? To prejudge and do it poorly in a way that ultimately isn't fair to the alleged victim, as what happened with the Ray Rice situation, and made the Ravens look foolish, made the league an embarrassment. I think that's a far worse outcome than what we've seen here.
That's definitely. But I think they already.
And I trust that the league. What nefarious reason do you think the league is doing this for?
Oh, I don't know if it's nefarious, but I was intrigued by Adam Schefter's report, basically saying a source told him. Now, of course, that could be somebody close to the Elliott family or whatever, but a source told him the NFL was trying to pin something on Zeke Elliott. I'm with you. That sounds sort of far-fetched, but I do believe in conspiracies, and so I think the NFL has probably at some time tried to pin something on a player, or sort of the thought is in the aftermath of the Ray Rice thing. I think they are scared to death. To a point you made earlier, I think they're scared to death of something coming out down the road. Something, hey, we've done our due diligence. My gosh, I hope so. It's been like a year. And then, they go to civil trial, and then we look horrible. And I think what we talked about earlier is right. If the NFL came out right now and said, we don't have enough evidence to do anything to him on that thing, now they might say, everybody be okay. And then if other stuff came to light, then they could go, okay, we're going to suspend him for 6 games or whatever. I think it'd be fine. I don't understand what the NFL's doing. I really don't. Now, the key is, though, for our purposes right now, Jerry has in his mind he came strong with Zeke and just said there's basically nothing to the domestic violence.
He said he's reviewed the entire situation, so he's actually claiming that he's seen whatever evidence and testimony Roger Goodell and his staff have accumulated, and his ruling based on that review is that there's nothing at all that verifies the claim against Ezekiel Elliott, and therefore he's suggesting the Cowboys have no reason to suspect, based on the allegations, that Zeke Elliott is deserving of any kind of disciplinary action, including any sort of suspension whatsoever. And so from that standpoint, since the NFL hasn't said anything publicly about its findings, Jerry's basically, A, challenging the league to contradict him, and B, he's sending, got my alphabet out of order there, and then B, he's basically saying, if you suspend my player, this is going to be different than what the Patriots did with Tom Brady. We'll fight this because we don't think it has any validity based on what we've seen.
I think you're right in that the Cowboys have certainly, what Jerry did is lay down his side of the story, and I think basically in my mind what Jerry did is said, I dare you, with me going to Canton with Ed Werder, I dare you to come after me right now, come after my team and suspend my best player. He is the best player on the Cowboys. Any dispute about that? He is the number one player on the Dallas Cowboys. Now, you might make a Dak. We could have that argument or whatever because Dak had an unbelievable rookie season. But I believe that Zeke Elliott is the best player on the Cowboys roster. And Jerry basically said, you have nothing. You have nothing on our guy. And so he's in a...
As it relates to domestic violence.
As it relates to the domestic violence. Now, can you suspend a guy if the DJ turned up missing in the whatever that Clutch thing was the other day? The Clutch nightclub. Some guy gets his nose punched and they can't find him. Police can't even find this guy. I mean, this happened about a week ago. Did
you read the story in the? I think it was the Washington Post did a story about the Cowboys fixer. David Wells, have you read about that?
Yeah, they wrote it in 2016. But yeah, and I've known David. You have too. I've known David for a long time, and
so we all know
Kent Babb
teams.
wrote that story.
I'm not suggesting Zeke Elliott did anything wrong in this situation either, because there's no evidence to suggest that he did, other than a guy has a broken nose and doesn't know who did it. But teams do have the ability to use their resources, shall we say, to make things go away when they want.
Yeah, I think it happens. Now, I have a serious question for you. Do you think...
That was a serious observation, so go ahead.
That's fine. Oh, did you want me to, applaud or,
No, you were acting like that was not a serious comment because you said, I have a serious question.
I have a serious question.
Okay.
And I'm sorry that you interrupted that. I want to ask you this. Do you think that DJ is still alive?
Well, you said he was hired by the team on Twitter, didn't you?
I hope people realize that's satire when I do that. I'll tell you one thing that's funny. It's a little aside here. Andy Borowitz is hilarious. He writes now for the New Yorker on their online, and he's just his The Onion, basically. He has unbelievably funny headlines. But what happens with people that are just sort of getting into politics and reading political news because of the whole Donald Trump fiasco? And I'm not trying to make a political statement, but there is a lot of craziness out there. Everything he writes now, I'm not going to name names, but there are some of our buddies in the media who just bite on it. And they think when he says something like Betsy DeVos, is she the Secretary of Education? She says something like...
Look at you knowing your cabinet.
Half the... She says more than, I don't know. She got all her numbers wrong in some headline, and it was very funny about Betsy DeVos.
Well, I just got my alphabet wrong. It happens.
I know, but it's anyway. All let's say, we could cut this later. I just wanted to tell you.
Usually don't screw up on the second letter of the alphabet. Just so you know. Usually much later in the sequence.
But I think it's okay, by the way, to sometimes Twitter have people. You don't have to.
Yes,
everybody
I get
have
you,
to get
but
it.
I was just mocking you there. And
I know you were. I certainly have. Now I do want to hear, because Jerry, and we'll continue to hear about this, Jerry does race to his running back's defense. And
well, I wouldn't know that he's raced to it. It's been, like you said, a year, right? And there have been other situations in which Zeke has been accused of misconduct of some sort.
Well, you're right. Now, some of these, I got to be careful when I call something a silly incident. In the whole scheme of life, compared to domestic violence, whatever happened out at St. Patrick's Day, you shouldn't do that. I mean, they're up there partying and they're having a big time, and he reaches over, and I don't think he asked that woman, hey, can I pull your shirt down? I mean, that's a bad thing. Don't do that, Zeke. I mean, but now that's different than domestic violence. And the problem with Zeke is this. There's other things working now. Now, suddenly, it's all hitting. It's like Dez back in the day. You remember those little stuff. Now, the thing about him swatting his mom in the face with a baseball cap, that wasn't little stuff. But sagging is little stuff. Sagging is you're at the mall and you're sagging with your friends, your jeans. That's a little thing. That's not that big of a deal. But we make an enormous deal out of it. So now we're trying to suspend Zeke. And I'm not defending Zeke's goofiness, whatever happened in that clutch bar. I don't know if he hit the guy or not. The guy's disappeared. But there is some – he's about to get suspended for some of the silliness instead of the case that we've waited on for a whole year.
How do you know he's going to get suspended?
And that's no, it's just my opinion that he is. I think they're going to do something. I think the league is going to – I think the league looks bad if they spend a year on this thing and they don't have something. I mean, they look silly. God, or are you going to say they look like the greatest investigators ever? Boy, we really take our time. They're so damn thorough. The NFL. Way to go, Roger. Way to take a year and a half on an investigation.
Not everyone's Mannix or Columbo and can do this in the time frame of an hour.
They could when Pac-Man was out there breaking figurines at the Jewel.
Easy. He made it pretty easy. Let's be honest.
They did a pretty. Now I do want to hear this. I want to hear a little bit from Jerry. Talking about, because you can comment on this, Ed, and I think it's very important.
It's a broader issue with the Cowboys, that it goes beyond Ezekiel Elliott.
One of the things that I would add to that, the stronger your core base is, the more risk you can take sometimes on individual situations. The stronger your core base is, it allows you to take some risk. If you look closely, look across the league, and you'll see it happen every day. And so when they have that core and it's strong, it's a whipping, it's deep. We've had teams that, as in the 29 years that I've been with the Cowboys, that could handle risk in that area better than other teams. Jason's right. This is a basically high core character team.
All right, there it is. The high, and I love, and we may hear from Jason later, but Jason started like naming all. I mean, like literally the support staff. Like I'm going to name now our high character. Don't you love that? And people do this in the NFL sometimes. Well, the majority of the deal isn't out, hitting women and doing all this stuff. We got this great core group. Now, where Jerry goes on to talk about this is he can't help, in talking about these things, to think back to the glory years. And the great thing about the Doomsday Podcast, among many, is with Ed, you being right here in the middle of this whole thing, you covered those. You had a front row seat to that. You were a beat writer for the Dallas Morning News during the glory days, the 90s, the dynasty. And so when you hear Jerry loves to talk about Charles Haley. Now, I have an issue with Jerry because he's always like picking the most amazing story ever with like a player, or even brought up Nate Newton that had all. He never, like Jerry would never bring up the ones that like Spillman or the Underwood guy, Demetrius Underwood, all the things that didn't work out, the disasters that guys that had baggage or, sadly some mental health issues.
Leon Lett got suspended and Eric Williams had issues.
Sure. But even with Leon Lett, he was so great that was okay. What did they get him from Emporia State? Like what round did they get him in? That was the greatest
7th round pick.
Yeah, it's the greatest 7th round pick. Maybe in the history of the organization. But now there you are back in the 90s. You see what he's saying about if you have the core, then you kind of can have the leeway to put up with some of these other things. You watch that back in the 90s. Now, is that a fair comparison to sort of think about this core group and then compare it to that core group back then, those guys you covered?
And a guy we didn't mention who certainly fits the description because he put himself in positions that jeopardized his availability to the Cowboys, and in fact, he was suspended, Michael Irvin, right? One of the leaders on that team, one of the core members of those Super Bowl dynasties, put himself in a situation where he hurt his football team because he got suspended. And I think
can you be a core member and have all sorts of issues at the same time?
I think he proved that is possible. But what else?
Maybe Zeke's the modern day.
What else did that team have? That team had a quarterback who had an unbelievable work ethic and demanded accountability. It had a charismatic and in charge head coach who was very demanding of his players and didn't tolerate anything less than their best effort and a full commitment to their football team. Now, talent has always protected the NFL, and it always will. It did back then, and it does now. But when they took some of these risks and they didn't have a quarterback who was as demanding as Aikman, and didn't have a head coach who was as powerful as a Bill Parcells or a Jimmy Johnson, then it all fell apart, didn't it? Didn't it fall apart with Pac-Man Jones and Tank Johnson and Terrell Owens? Yeah, it all fell apart, even though those were very talented teams.
Wait, Tony was here, and I think Witten was they were on those teams. I mean, the greatest leaders of the past.
What did Jerry say about that team in 2007 that became the first number one seed to lose its opening playoff game at home in the history of the NFL? He said that was the best team I ever had that didn't win a championship. That's what he said. And I think a lot of it was because of the internal issues. And you cannot go into seasons every year when you're as compromised as they are on defense without Randy Gregory starting the season. Maybe without Damian Wilson starting the season, without DeMarcus Lawrence starting the season. I mean, when you have numbers of guys and Rolando McClain, I mean, you can't have players who play prominent starting roles on the weak part of your team being out for reasons of choice. That's what I'm saying.
I think no, and I think
did I put that well? I mean,
no, I think so.
And Jerry has said before. I remember interviewing him about Pac-Man Jones, and he used to say, "Hey, one of my philosophies is when I have a really good team, like he did back then, or like he does right now, I'm more willing to take risk in the draft because I think that's necessary because I'm not picking very high, so I need to take chances that I otherwise might not."
Yeah, I believe that. I want to hear one more thing from Jason, and this to me was one of the themes of the day. This was a phrase, and it has to do with accountability.
Character is critical to us. With the Dallas Cowboys, we've built this team over the last 5 or 6 years with great character guys. And we believe very strongly in that. That's the kind of team we want to have. That's the kind of organization we want to have. We believe when you build with character, that's what gives you the best chance of having success and building the team we're all proud to be a part of. We have 90 football players on our team right now. We love the character of our team. Having said that, we have had some issues and some incidents here over the off season, and we'll address those issues. There's a standard that we have here with the Dallas Cowboys, behavior on and off the field, and how we're going to handle things. And we're going to hold those players accountable to what those standards are, regardless of what the circumstances were that were involved. Having said that, I have a perspective over a football team. I walk into our building every day, and I get a chance to be around Rich Bisaccia and Rod Marinelli and Scott Linehan and all the guys on our coaching staff and our support staff, the Jim Mowers, the Mike McCords, the Rich Dalrymples, all these guys who are just first-class guys and what they do. And along with that are the players. I get a chance to come to work with Jason Witten every day and Tyron Smith and Travis Frederick and Zach Martin and Dak Prescott and Cole Beasley, and I can go on and on and on. Sean Lee, Tyrone Crawford, Byron Jones, Jeff Heath, all these guys. We built the team the right way. We value character, and the character of the men in our locker room is as good a character as I've been around in my career, and we believe very strongly in that. And when issues come up with these guys, we address them. Accountability does not mean infallibility. If guys make mistakes, coaches make mistakes, players make mistakes, we address them, and we address them relative to the standards that we have. And we solve the issue and we move on, and we learn from them. We learn individually, we learn collectively. And that's the culture we've tried to build around here.
So all that, hey, this is to me, one of the silliest, and for such a smart guy. I mean, he was on some of those teams you covered back in the day, from Princeton, Jason Garrett, talking about, he just starts naming good guys on every team. I mean, I don't care how think of the worst character team you can ever think of in NFL history. And for some reason, I think people always think of like the former Raiders teams, sadly. But I mean, other teams that you think of that had some big, bad problems. And those 90s Cowboys had some of those. And it's just funny to go, well, here, I'm going to give you a list of good guys on our team. Well, still, your best player's out screwing around and having all this stuff hanging over his head. Does it really matter who your core group is if your best player doesn't really care about that core group? And he's off doing it. Now, one thing you said that sparked something with me was Troy and sort of his ability to have that quarterback who could hold everybody accountable and all of that. And I do think Dak, especially once they get back together and are in camp, has that in him. You and I had a one-on-one with Dak earlier in the offseason at a high-end jewelry store at North Park, and I think we both have the thought that as long as if Zeke can just attach himself to Dak, I mean, he can't be with him 24 hours a day, But I do think Dak, maybe it's too early in his career to just expect him to have this overpowering impact on the team, but he already is doing that in some respects. So I think he's not where Troy ever is, and who knows if he will be. But there's potential there for him to be sort of that guy you talked about, with the guy you covered all those years ago.
As long as the obvious friendship between Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott doesn't result in Zeke influencing Dak in a way that's more negative than he otherwise might be. But, ultimately each of these guys has to make their own choices, and more often they need to make the right one, because despite what Jason Garrett said about them caring about character, and it's a central theme in their organization and the way they build their team, and he's right, the roster for the most part does have high character guys. All the guys he mentioned, those are high character guys. But the fact remains that over the last 3 years, the Cowboys have had more suspensions than any team in football. They've had 10, and I believe the Ravens are second with 7. And so this is obviously an issue. And as I said, you can't keep playing games where some of your players have put their own off-the-field decision-making ahead of doing what's in the best interest of the teams, and therefore they're betraying their own teammates. And I also think that the Cowboys do a great job of talking about the right kind of guys and what the standard is and holding players to the standard. But what they don't do is they don't ever publicly say what disciplinary action they've undertaken against a player. And to me, that's harmful to them, because it makes it look like they're doing nothing but tolerating the behavior. Yeah, you're right. From a perception standpoint, that is it, that nothing's happening. And one other thing I want to say, and I want us to, as we get ready, there's a linebacker who's gotten a lot of attention on this team. And we have... Ed, you have some background, some new information to sort of bring on the whole Jaylon Smith thing. I want to get into that. One thing that bothers me, though, about Jason and their overall approach to what you were just talking about. Hey, we've got high character. We got the right kind of guys and all this. They want credit for due diligence. They want credit for, we went back and talked to his Pop Warner coaches. Do we think about all people in life? Think about like the worst, people that have, I don't know, OJ, the quarterback, the running back who was so horrible for the Rams from Nebraska that ended up sadly, Lawrence Phillips. I mean, their Pop Warner coaches would have said nice things about him. Do you think there's anybody? And they're always like, we went and talked to junior high. We went back to Pop Warner. Those aren't the people. If you're doing your due diligence, you think those are the people. So they want credit for literally going back and talking to these people's like coaches in junior high and Pop Warner. Like, that's not, you don't find out anything by doing that. I mean, you really don't find out unless you go to those police departments and you go look at the records and you go find people that, they're old girlfriends, for goodness sakes. That leads down another path, and sometimes those old girlfriends don't want any involvement and would like to forget that part of their lives. But I'm just saying, well, no, I'm saying if something bad happened there, Ed, you're looking at me like I'm crazy. I'm just saying they want credit for all this due diligence. And the due diligence, a lot of times, is just kind of laughable. It's just spin. It's PR spin. Yeah. And we're not buying it here at the Doomsday Podcast. Now, Ed, one of the players on this roster, we always have, camp battles, and boy, we look forward to that. This is a little different thing for the Cowboys. One of the most talked about position players on this roster now for over a year is second-round pick Jaylon Smith. And we're going to be talking about this quite a bit all year to see, and especially during camp, how much progress has he made? And, of course, that came up today.
We all know his circumstances and what he needs to overcome. It looks really good. All testing, all feeling really looks as good as I could have hoped that it would look at the time. We'll see. And there's Dr. Jerry.
The least credible of all the Jerrys, as I've mentioned. Although Judge Jerry, maybe he'll be bad too, but because we're just hearing about him for the first time.
The legal. That's right. Legal Jerry is kind of a defense attorney. I think Jerry actually would have been a really good attorney, especially, I don't think he would have been a really good prosecutor, but I think as a criminal defense attorney, he's just had so much.
He wouldn't have prosecuted anyone.
Well, it is.
So Jaylon Smith. For those who don't know, Jerry assumes everybody does know, obviously a risky second-round pick a year ago, did not play or practice at all as a rookie in the NFL last season. Cowboys took him believing that devastating ACL tear he suffered that also led to nerve damage in his knee and drop foot is something that would improve over time, and that they were willing to take that risk and use a second-round pick to get this player and believe him capable of getting on the field and being a dominant type of player because of his unique physical skill set and being a big factor in their defensive front seven this year. And he is. We talked to him on the Doomsday Podcast, had a great interview with him. He's the kind of guy you pull for. He's fully invested. He's about all the right things. We've talked about the guys who aren't about the right things. We think this guy is about the right kind of things. He is going to practice on, a protected sort of basis every second or third day. But I have been told that, like Dr. Jerry suggested there, the latest EMG results do show that there has been significant improvement in the regeneration of the nerve. Now, I think there are people in the organization who know this subject matter very well and have worked closely with the player who believe that it may still be next spring before he gets all of it back. But they now believe he is going to have a 12-year career, and it's no unremarkable accomplishment that he's put himself in the position that he is right now, that even though he's still going to be wearing a knee brace and a device to help him control his foot, he is going to be able to get back on the field. Now, do they think he's going to be what he was at Notre Dame this first year? No, absolutely not. They leave almost no possibility that is going to be the outcome.
Well, he almost has had more pressure put on him because of something we've talked mostly about Zeke, but they had a potential starting linebacker get into some sort of nonsense, a road rage parking spot incident up in Frisco, talking about Damian Wilson. That was another thing that happened with the Cowboys. And that makes Damian Wilson has been a valuable guy for the last couple of seasons with the Cowboys. Or was he rookie last season?
He played every game last year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But this is his second or third season. Well, we'll go to the tape on
Don't
that.
try to implicate me in this.
Hey, I just thought you might help me out. You're just like,
if I knew I would, but
Mosley drown. I believe this.
If I can't swim, I ain't getting in. I don't care.
For 2 seasons, the 5th round rookie out of Minnesota. Or 4th round, for God's sakes, has been he's been a part of the team. I think this puts even more pressure on.
And this will be his third season.
Man, I hate that I doubted myself. Something about your blank look made me doubt myself. So here he is. Here's Damian Wilson. We don't know if he could get suspended. And that puts a little bit more pressure on Jaylon Smith. And what you said grabbed my attention. The one little part, and we always sort of bring this up, and this is what makes me, if it weren't so sad, I'd laugh. You said he's going to have something to control his foot. There's never been a player. Now, there have been braces. There have been guys with some knee injuries, or coming back from knee injuries. As Jerry pointed out, all the offensive linemen wear braces. That's just kind of a thing they do. But a valuable, fast, athletic linebacker, I don't think we've ever had a case where we could point to a device. What's that thing called?
An AFO.
An AFO. I don't believe in AFO. So
glad you're humoring yourself here while we're talking about a serious situation.
No, it's not that. I mean, it is serious, but it's not that serious. The thing is, and I think he's had a great attitude and he's approached this. It's like I've never rooted more for a player that I'm more cynical about. And part of it is just because I have, kind of like you, been trying along the way to go, I don't believe Jerry. I want to go hear from people that are physicians and people that know what they're talking about, people in the medical world. And I just still haven't, in my mind, been given a strong feeling. Although what you just said, and I want people to understand this, because they hear a million things, and they hear speculation, and they hear doctors that have never even seen X-rays of his situation spout off about what happens. You have been talking to people that know the situation better. And so for them to say, as you said, that it could be by next spring, but they think he's going to play this year, is very significant because, quite honestly, I still thought it was a little pie in the sky to think he was going to have be a valuable part of the defense this season.
And people are going to say, and partly because of the circumstances that they have at linebacker, which may be their biggest area of concern, which is saying something given the young secondary they're going to be playing and the fact that they don't really have an established pass rusher up front. But I think the linebacker situation is as precarious as any that they have. That being said, I do not think that they are forcing Jaylon Smith onto the field prematurely. I don't think their medical people would sign off and put this player at risk after what he's been through for Jerry to have the opportunity to justify him being a second-round pick, who like Jerry said today, hey, before his injury, he was the number one player on our board.
Let's hear that. Let's hear that from Jerry. I thought that was fascinating.
Jason is a number one on our draft board and evaluation, was at the top of the board, number one pick. A year ago, we paid a 2 for him. That is the equivalent of this year's draft, number one. You can you can move back one deal, and if you trade that pick. So we invested this year's number one in him, and he was at the top of the board and would have been at the top of the board this year. The caveat is what we all wonder, can he play like he had the career playing at that particular time?
Caveat. Yeah, the caveat's pretty enormous, but they're already, I can hear it in his voice. If this somehow hits and he becomes, let's say, 90% of what the player he was at Notre Dame. And obviously from a mental standpoint, learning the game, learning the defense, I mean, this guy is just, and he's like high character. I mean, there's so many intangibles involved. But again, and I think Jerry's setting up that moment of this was one of the greatest risks I've ever taken. And, of course, that'll lead to 20 more years of risk-taking if they hit on this guy. My point, and you, that was interesting what you said earlier. You're like, I don't think they're putting him at risk. They don't think they're putting him at risk or whatever, which I think is true. My point is I have a hard time thinking he's going to be effective. Somebody with that, we don't have anything to compare it to. And that's hard for me because as of now, Jerry said something about a lesser brace. I love things like little phrases like that maybe they'll design a brace that's not as bulky and doesn't have to do, it doesn't have to put up with as much restriction. But right now, I just have a hard time thinking he's going to be effective at all this season.
I assume that would only happen if at some point he's able to control his foot, as an uninjured player would be able to do. And I think it's fair to be skeptical about if he can't do that and he requires this brace, how much is that going to affect his ability to change direction, his explosiveness? That's a required part of the skill set at the position he's playing. Like, you lose a fraction of a second, it's millions of dollars, right, when you're training for the combine. When you go run your 40, well, it's even more than that. The reason it's that is because on the field, you're not going to make it to the point you need to make it to make the tackle, or you can't cover. So yeah, I think that it's going to be a while. He's never played at this level. He's really never even practiced physically at this level. And so this is a whole new series of tests he's about to go through. And the preseason will be critical to him. But he's got a big jump to make just in terms of going from not playing at all to playing in the NFL, trying to play in the NFL in a very compromised state, it would seem. And I think most of the teams in the NFL who evaluated him, believe that he would play again. And the question was, well, what level is he going to get to? I had one personnel person on an NFC team say this guy would have been a top 5 pick in any draft the last 20 years if he hadn't gotten hurt, which goes to what Jerry said. But there were people who said he was off our board and we wouldn't have taken him because our doctors said it's, medically he's unlikely to be a great player ever again. Maybe he's just going to be an average player. It's going to take time either way.
And we, because we've gotten to know him a little bit, hope for the best. I don't, you wonder sometimes why I laugh. And it's not about
the sincerity there was just absent.
It's not about absent. The energy. No, I love the guy. I really do. But it is kind of funny to me that, because it's true. but like bowl games will never be the same because of Jaylon Smith. Like he has laid the groundwork for it to be totally fine with all draft-eligible players to sit out bowl games. So in a sense,
as we saw,
he has like ruined bowl season all of us.
Even though he still says, I have no misgivings about the decision I made, and I would make it again even knowing that I was going to get hurt. I wanted to play in that game against all those other great players, and I would make the same decision all over again.
I saw them making like a big deal out of that on Mike and Mike or something. Like, oh my gosh, you'll never believe what they said. And it's like, well, told us that about 2 months ago on the Doomsday Podcast. By the way, thanks for everybody who's been tuning in. If it's your first time, tell a friend, subscribe free, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, go to Google Play, so many of them. Am I missing anything? We've got a lot of different ways you can find us. I want to remind everybody of this. We are going to, throughout the season, offer sort of a different level of access. This is sort of
people will be coming over for dinner and that sort of thing. Swim in the pool.
Yeah, we will give out Ed's address, and you can play tennis with Ed anytime you feel like it. But Patreon is some people say Patreon. I don't know. You can pay us Patreon. You
tomato.
Yeah. Good folks. We're involved with them, and the reason is because I kind of like the thought of I was with ESPN for years. You were with them longer than I was. I've been back and forth,
and deservedly
with them.
so.
Yeah, certainly. I've sort of been going back and forth for years. But now they have like ESPN insider status. That was smart of them. ESPN, that was smart. It's like we can make extra money, but we also give people actually like really good stuff. We give them their money's worth. And so with Patreon, that's kind of what we're doing. We hope to offer you, and then you just pay. We'll have a little different levels, but pay whatever level of access you want, and then we'll try to deliver on that for you. www.patreon.com/Doomsday Podcast.
We don't try to deliver, we deliver.
It is Matt Mosley with Ed Werder of the Doomsday Podcast. So happy to have so many of you along, and we missed you. We missed you about 3 weeks hiatus. We heard from you. You've asked us to not ever do that again to you, and I'm not going to make any promises, but we'll see. We'll take that under advisement and see where we go on that. Now, there's one thing we haven't mentioned, and of course we're talking about the Cowboys' State of the Team address, which was dominated by Jerry. Jason was there. Stephen was there.
They were? They were both there?
Stephen probably talked for a combined minute and a half during an hour-long news conference. Now, what was funny to me is I thought it was going to just race past an hour. And Rich Dalrymple, the director of public relations there for the Cowboys, or VP, whatever he is, he just shut her down. Just said, no, okay, we're done.
High character support guy is what Jason Garrett called him.
And so for 35 minutes of it, it was literally, and I know Brad Shem tried to kind of move them on to some other roster things, but it was the character thing, and then that's the Cowboys. And I tweeted something earlier today, and we're coming to you on Sunday right after. We're going to release this later this afternoon. I tweeted something, in half joking but being somewhat serious. The Cowboys are uniquely, people wonder about, gosh, do you hate to have to open camp like this and talk about all this stuff? How many times have they done this in the past? This is how camp almost always opens.
Every year.
Some suspension.
Each of the last 3 years, they've opened the season with a defensive starter suspended. So, they're accustomed to it.
So, yes, I think they are uniquely prepared for this. Ed, this is the first training camp, where Tony Romo hasn't been the starter at the beginning of camp since the 2007 camp. He, of course, famously took over for Drew Bledsoe 6 games into 2006. He's been at every training camp since 2003, so going back a long time. That's when Tony was undrafted out of Eastern Illinois, and that's when those were he and I were a little closer back then in those early years before he became the Tony Romo. But
sure, it wasn't, the dynamic wasn't that you became what you are now? Good point. Yeah, maybe you're the one who changed.
Maybe I need to view this. I don't think I've changed. I may have changed a bit.
I wish you would.
That's right. You've prayed for me to change. I haven't changed enough. So Tony Romo's not there, and I thought this was interesting. Jerry was asked basically like, you're sort of surprised how comfortable you are.
And it was very late in the press conference.
Yeah, how comfortable you are not to have Tony around.
I am a lot more comfortable than I ever thought I would be this time last year or beyond, not having Romo. So that has everything to do with the year that Dak had, and more importantly, the way that Dak is approaching and approached throughout last year, but approaching this year. So it is a really good feeling. I'm excited about the fans' excitement about Dak.
Yeah, Dak Prescott, I mean, there's no reason not to expect as remarkable a season as he had as a rookie who probably shouldn't have been expected at this point a year ago to even play a game, to start every game and lead the Cowboys to a 13-3 record and a division title. Really speaks to his ability. And people I've talked to in the league, based on his work ethic, we all saw he went and worked out, with Tom Shaw again down in in Florida at the IMG facility, Disney facility down there. His work ethic has been compared to a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning, and not compared to those people by Jerry, because Jerry once compared Romo to that. But this guy has a unique work ethic, and he is devoted, and people think in the league that he has the kind of skill set that will continue to evolve. He'll continue to become a better pocket passer, and I know from talking to Cowboys coaches, one of the priorities with him is more consistent accuracy. And then I think Scott Linehan suggested that they're going to continue to evolve the offense in a way that allows them to benefit from all of his unique physical abilities, which I take to mean running the football more, especially in goal line type situations or red zone type situations.
I hope. I think that's not going to be the greatest thing for his career if he has too many goal line running situations. But I do think, now this is scary, the player I'm about to bring up, because the Cam Newton believes sometimes that he's not protected like other quarterbacks. Now, the good thing about Dak is he's already sort of established that he likes to kind of hang back there in the pocket. So there's no thought of like, well, Dak's this huge guy who likes to run a lot and all that kind of thing. But one of the most dangerous things about Cam Newton, and obviously last year was not a good one for the Panthers, and they've had some weird things happen recently with the firing of their GM, right before training camp opens. But the thing that made Cam Newton so unbelievably
that won't ever
dangerous.
happen in Dallas, by the way.
That's true.
The GM will not get fired moments before training camp starts.
No. It will never happen. But Dak has the ability. Now, is he as big and quite as durable as a Cam Newton? No. I don't even know if he has the running skills. I'm almost certain he does not have the running skills that Cam Newton has. But he is athletic enough to make teams worry about that. And he didn't take off much last year. I think he's going to be way more comfortable picking his spots and knowing if there's nothing downfield when to take off. And that's just going to make, all these people like to talk about, sophomore slump. Teams got more film on him. They've had more time to study for him. Now, that's all true. I'm not saying that's not some truth to that. But as Dak told us during our one-on-one with him, I also have some things to add to my game. I'm looking at film. I'm looking at these defenses and everything. And of all the things you might worry about the season, suspensions to Zeke. Oh, my gosh, Jaylon Smith, can he play with the drop foot? All these different things. I'm least worried about Dak Prescott.
Well, as long as he has Ezekiel Elliott and they can run the football, then I think that prevents the defense from being too big of a liability to where they get into situations where they have a lot of offensive shootouts, although I think Dak Prescott proved in the Green Bay playoff game he's capable of getting into a scoring contest with even an Aaron Rodgers. He did the same thing and prevailed in Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger. That was largely because of Ezekiel Elliott. And I think one of the big things that's going to come out of this camp, especially offensively, is how good is that offensive line? Everybody talks about this offensive line being full of, Pro Bowlers and Hall of Famers. Well, they lost two starters on the offensive line at left guard and right tackle, and their ability to adequately replace those two players is going to be critical to the success of not only the quarterback but the running back.
Ed, it was fun. Of course, Frito with us here, Frito Nation Productions. Always great to have him along. I'm very proud. I know Frito is too, and the whole team. And again, Crossover Media Group has joined forces with us, and that's why lots of folks in future podcasts you'll be hearing some folks. We're very happy to have some folks who want to have a partnership with us from an advertising standpoint. And can you imagine that there's a group out there, Ed, that said we want to go sell you guys. We think people might want to maybe spend money to be associated with you. I mean, that shocks me a little bit, but I'm pleased that that's the case. And I just want to say this: we're very proud of you for going into the Hall of Fame. I think it's well deserved. And just real quickly, have you written anything down? Do you have a speech, or do you know how long your speech is supposed to be? I know Jerry today was asked how long his speech was. Do you know what your allotted time is or anything like that?
I thought I'd just allow Jean Jones, since she's already doing something and she's already up there, I'll just let her do my speech as well as she's doing Jerry's induction. No, my thing's obviously significantly smaller than what the players, or in the case of Jerry, general manager, president, and owner of the team, how they're being honored. I may speak at the banquet on Friday night. I will at the big ceremony on Saturday be on stage, and I will receive a plaque, and I'll shake David Baker's hand, who's the director of the Hall of Fame.
Big guy.
Huge man. And so there'll be those public opportunities. Whether I think they said they may ask me to speak for a minute or two. Good luck with that. I usually go on and on forever, but not like Jerry. Yeah. So I think it'll be all right. So there's a couple different things that you can take part in. They encourage you to do as much as you want. And I think this is the only opportunity I'm going to get of this kind, and I certainly didn't expect it. I'm very appreciative of it, and Jill and I are going, and we're going to take part in as much as possible.
How many suits are you taking?
I think 2.
And which ones?
I got a new gray one, and I'll probably take that, and then I'll take my bright blue one that I wore several times during the season last year. It was a Christmas gift from the lovely and thoughtful Jill Werder.
Is Favre going to be there?
I don't know. He went in last year and
I wondered
had the good sense to mention me, almost like it was a premonition. I don't know if he's going to be there. I think, but a lot of the Hall of Fame players like Troy Aikman's been a big part of trying to get everybody to come back on an annual basis, and I know Elway will be there because Terrell Davis is going in. So I think it's going to be a great environment just to be around great players, the players that piqued my interest in the game and created a love of the game that made me want to be a part of it in whatever way I could.
Yeah.
And this is the way I could.
Well, you had an unbelievable run there at ESPN. Your career continues on podcasting. I know you have some other possibilities, and hopefully
I might have an announcement in a short space of time before we go too far into training.
Yeah, no, I'll be excited. I hope you will break the news right here on the Doomsday Podcast. Please let everybody know about what we're doing with the podcast, and we wish you well there, and we hope that you'll call home and maybe squeeze a few minutes in with the Doomsday Podcast while you're in Canton. And then lastly, Frito and I will spend a few minutes this evening teaching you how to record interviews on your phone.
At least I have a phone capable of it now.
We're going to put you to work. And that is...
So I can write it off?
Yeah, exactly. The Doomsday Podcast, it's back, and we'll take you through the rest of the season. For Ed Werder, I'm Matt Mosley. Have a great evening.
Stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before. And the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this godforsaken town. That emptiness, it feels from your head down to your toes. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes. Once you were a young girl with lovers which way the cold wind blows. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes. Come down, the carols have been sung. You're aching for your children, for the time when they were young. Back when all you wanted was some time to yourself. Back when your life was something else. And I wish that I could tell you what it takes to stand up tall. But the moral of this story is there ain't no moral at all. It happened all for you, and it will again.
Having a teen feels like having your own live-in influencer. Somehow you know the latest makeup trend and the fact that skinny jeans are not the most flattering pants. Now it's time for you to show them what's up, thanks to Domino's. From April 22nd through April 28th, carry out as many large 2-topping pizzas from Domino's as you want for only $6.99 each. And teach your kiddo that saving money and Domino's pizza will never go out of style. Carry out only. You must ask for this limited time offer. Valid 4/22 through 4/28. Tax may apply. Prices, participation, and charges may vary.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.